Every morning for 9 years, a man walked past a wall and said nothing. He built that wall himself. He knew exactly what was behind that wall. And if the wrong person ever found out what he had hidden behind that wall, it would have cost him his job, his name, and the one thing he had left, which was the belief that he was right and every single person around him, including every one of his supervisors and every one of his bosses, was wrong. And his name was Charles Vermot, and it's actually pronounced in French, I believe, Charles Vermot, and it looks like Charles Vermont. And he was a watchmaker, and this is the story of how he agreed to look like an absolute fool for almost a decade just so that he could be proven right forever. Oh my goodness, let's get into this one. Hey, what's up? I'm Wachowski. This is What's on Your Reese Day. No reviews, none of that kind of stuff. We're just one man. I guess this time we're going to be one man, one wall, and one movement that should not exist and somehow does. So let's go back to the very beginning, and the beginning is way further back than you think it's going to be. So I'm going to call this segment one. I'm going to say this is the first. So our story lands in January of 1969 in a Swiss town, of course, called the Locle, right? Where for like the winters, we know they run long, and the tolerances sometimes they run a little tighter than that. But it's really where a few years earlier, and it's going to start with a birthday. Okay. Zenith was founded in 1865. As the 100th anniversary kind of came into view, the company wanted to market with something that nobody had ever built before, like a watch that wound itself and timed events at the same time, like a true automatic chronograph. And they set to work around 1962, aiming to have it ready for the centenary in 1965. And not everything is according to a movie plot, right? It wasn't ready in 1965. This kind of thing like rarely is. Like the project stalled and then it restarted and then it dragged on because what they were reaching for was like genuinely hard to do. And they weren't alone though. Like two other camps were chasing this exact same prize, the automatic chronograph. Like over in Japan, Seiko was building its own automatic chronograph, and back in Switzerland, a group that had pulled together, right, multiple people. They had together and combined Hoyer and Breitling and Hamilton and this movement specialist called Buren, and it's Buren, and they were working alongside Dubois Duprat, assembling their own mechanisms and trying to race to get to this. And like we have, if you visualize this, there were three teams, right? And one imaginary finish line, and a whole industry's pride on who could cross this line first, right? Because if you can be first, then you are the one that gets retold in history, right? Now, there were much easier ways to do this and harder ways to do this, and the Swiss group took the logical and sensible shortcut. Like they bolted a chronograph module on top of an existing automatic caliber. Clever, effective, quick, right? Zenith refused to do that. Zenith built theirs the hard way as one fully integrated design from like the ground up with the timekeeping and the chronograph and the self-winding all woven into a single movement. And if you have a third party watchmaker that works with you and that you hand them an El Primero, sometimes they get very excited and sometimes you'll see them take a deep breath and calm down because they know that they're in for something when they start to work on that movement. And these folks, they made their watch beat fast, like ridiculously fast, 36,000 vibrations an hour, when almost everything else of that era lobbed along far slower than that. We know that. You know, and this thing had 278 parts. It had a column wheel again, which is that elegant but also very expensive way to run a chronograph. And the thing was thin. It was just 6.5 millimeters tall. And that high beat, I don't think it was showing off. It let the watch measure down to the 10th of a second. And again, it's a chronograph, so you want it to be accurate, right? And it gave the seconds hand a gorgeous, almost like a liquid sweep. By the start of 1969, Zenith caught wind that the Swiss group was about to announce, and so Zenith went first. On the 10th of January in Geneva, they revealed the movement to the world and they called it, ironically, right, El Primero, right? El Primero, as in the first. And yes, that's Spanish. And in a kind of three-way photo finish, I would say, naming your movement the first was equal parts kind of confidence and also a dare. Like Seiko and the Swiss group both kind of announced within months, and they still argue over who was truly first, and that argument will never die. In fact, I'm sure I will receive hate messages from some folks by just telling this story. And I'm not even saying that this is what I believe. I'm just telling you this is what Zenith reported. Okay. So take a chill pill. But Zenith actually said it first, and they said it out loud, and they said it in public, and that name stuck to the movement forever. You can still buy a Zenith with an El Primero movement in it. And the watch that they put in it became an icon to its own right. Like the reference, the 386 or the A386, so A386. It's a 38 millimeters of steel and a dial you would know basically across a crowded room. Three overlapping registers, but in different colors. You could get gray, blue, like a light charcoal. It had this flash of red on the chronograph hand. And more than 50 years later, collectors still hunt for that specific watch. But the hero of this story isn't the watch or even the movement itself. It's one of the men whose hands were all over the movement inside of it. Charles Vermot, he ran the chronograph workshop, not like a marketing man, not an executive. He was a movement manufacturer. He was a maker. He was a creator. He was an inventor. And he was the person who knew where every single screw went into that movement. So let's hold on to him for a second. Now, I'm going to get into something, I'm going to call this the kill order. And then I would say in this kind of era, the ground moved. Like quartz arrived, a battery kept better time than 100 years of Swiss, right, gravitas, and it cost about as much as like lunch did. And history remembers this stretch as the quartz crisis, and a crisis is the absolute right word for that. By the end of the 1970s, quartz had overtaken mechanical watches like entirely, and the Swiss industry went into a full-blown freefall. Like storied houses, they went under. Whole towns that had built watches for generations watched the work completely dry up. People lost their jobs, and they kind of went into a bit of a their own depression. And here's kind of a wrinkle that kind of matters. There were two companies called Zenith. Ours, right, the Swiss watchmaker in Lille, and an American electronics giant called Zenith Radio. They were out of Chicago that made like televisions, and they were not related at all. And they shared a name that had caused the Swiss Zenith headaches in the American market for years. And then at the start of the 1970s, the American company was like, I got a solution to this problem. They solved it their way, and I would say the most bluntest way possible. The American Zenith, the TV manufacturer, they just went simply bought out the Swiss one. And the new owners, right, the TV guys, they looked at the ledger, they looked at quartz, and they decided that the future of watches was going to run on batteries. So the order came down. They sent messages over to Switzerland and they said, shut the mechanical side down, destroy your tooling, scrap all of your presses, the cams, the cutting tools, the stamps, and get rid of those plans for that El Primero while you're at it. You don't need it anymore. It's dead weight. And Charles Vermouth argued. He told them, look, the wheels turn. This is a pendulum. Calm down. And he told them mechanical watches are going to come back and that they were about to throw away knowledge that could not be bought back at any price in the future. He even put it in writing in a formal letter to management asking them, please preserve at least the tooling. And the answer came back a harsh no. And the tone of that no was the part that kind of stung. The gist of it was that the little Vermont from his tiny little town had been out in his swamp, quote, too long, and he needed to wake up to the electronic age. He was, in their word, sentimental. And when the Americans were calling him sentimental, it was not meant as a compliment. So Vermot said, fine, I'll destroy it myself. Now, segment three, I'm going to talk about the wall. Now, he did not destroy anything. He did not destroy a single thing. For months after everyone else had gone home, Charles carried the entire soul of the El Primero up a single narrow staircase into the attic. The French word for this is grenier. It's Grenier. I'm pretty sure I'm butchering that as well, like I always do. And I don't mean to like fodder any of these notes here. I mean like everything. This dude was meticulous. Now remember, he put in a full shift working with Zenith on quartz movements now. And when everyone else went home, hey guys, I'm just going to clean up and sweep up. Y'all go home, enjoy your dinner. He took every single piece upstairs. The presses, the extremely heavy tooling equipment. He disassembled some components, obviously, because he couldn't carry them themselves. But every single jig, every single gear, all of the cutters, every single stamping tool, every technical drawing, and by some account, there were more than 1,000 separate pieces that were packed into 9 large wooden crates that he took up and then assembled the wooden crates in the attics. The dies, some of them were so heavy that they came close to a ton of weight, and he took all of that upstairs. And he did not just stack it into some ridiculous pile heap like we would throw kind of like garbage into the garage and go run inside, right? He meticulously labeled every single thing. He started to catalog every single piece that was so precise that one day someone could just walk back into this thing and walk onto an assembly line and they could organize every single thing in order and get back up and running. And he kept a binder, and in it, every single plan was filed by hand in careful order. He was not stashing like junk in the garage in a loft, right? He was filing away essentially a working factory in sequence for a future he could not ever prove that was even coming, but he had a belief that it would. Now, some accounts say that his own brother helped him haul the load up. He told almost no one else. Now, I can't confirm the brother helped him, but that's from a couple of the resources that I was able to pull. That's the story that I got, which makes sense because you would need an extra set of hands. But then beyond that, he told no one else. His own son, for example, would not learn this whole truth for decades afterwards. And when it was all done, he had the space sealed behind a wall. And when he went back to work, he looked like a loyal employee. Meanwhile, the company just kept sinking. A staff once in the thousands fell to around 150 people. And at the end of 1978, the Americans just finally lost interest in this watch company, right? And they sold Zenith to a Swiss machine tool man named Paul Estella, and his group was known as Dixie. It's Dixi. And Costello was he was a curious buyer because he actually believed mechanical watchmaking had a future, and the exact moment almost no one else did. And the new owners, and he had kind of new hope for this. And the attic still stayed sealed. It was closed. Vermont kept his secret because, look, believing in mechanical watches in the abstract and knowing a whole hidden factory was waiting just behind a wall are two very different things. And we would argue, or I would argue, only one man carried the second thing of that. So just because your new owners believed in something didn't mean that they were going to put their money where their mouth was. So Vermont still waited. Now, segment four, I'm going to call this the longest shift. Okay, so now I want to slow down a little bit and sit with this man because this is the part that kind of gets under my skin a little bit. Like, Vermont wasn't a rebel by temperament. By every account, he was humble, ordinary, and deeply skilled, like local born, up in the hills. He had spent his whole life at a bench. He had a wife, he had a family, he had a steady job at a company that was, at that very moment, cutting people loose by the hundreds. And that job was exactly what he was putting on the line every single day that he kept that secret. Now, look at what his days might have actually become. This is kind of the stuff that I sit with when I read these stories and I kind of try to put myself in their shoes. Like, this was a man who had helped bring the El Primero into the world, a true watchmaker in the oldest sense of that word, someone who could take a bare movement and then just make it breathe. And what he was doing for his paycheck now, this guy was assembling quartz watches, like battery watches. The very thing that he had been sent to bury everything that he loved about the craft, he was sitting there and that was what he was doing every single day. Can you imagine with the kind of patience that would take and sort of biting your tongue mentality? So sit with the geometry with me of that for a little bit. Like he is downstairs at his bench day after day, snapping together the future of the Americans' orders, right? And one floor above his head, behind a wall that he built with his own hands, sits the entire soul of the mechanical movement that he wants to rescue someday. Like the presses and the plans and the keys to like the whole kingdom. They're locked in the dark right over him, where he fits another quartz module into another case. Now, he couldn't tell his colleagues, right? He couldn't tell his own son, who again would learn of this truth far decades later into the future. He would finish a shift building the machines that he had, supposedly were working to kill his trade, which they did, and he would go home carrying the biggest secret in Swiss watchmaking, and he could not breathe a word of it to any living soul. And he did this for 9 years. And here I'm going to step off the record a moment because the next part is me kind of imagining, I guess, as opposed to reporting. There's one detail that I think survives in my brain. His wife grew suspicious, right? Late nights. And she asked their son, right, if he knew what his father was up to. And the boy told her not to worry, that dad is just, he's a hard worker, mom. And that's all we really know, but you have to wonder what a secret that size can do to a household. A wife who feels something is off and can't name it, a son who's old enough to sense the shape of it without ever seeing the thing itself. And I'll leave it right there. I don't think a secret that big ever really stays at the factory. I think it comes home with you and I think it sits down at your dinner table. I just can't imagine what that might have been like in their household. And again, it's not a grand heroic gesture. It's just, I would say, maybe a single brave afternoon is, I guess, easy. You can do that once or twice, but this was like 9 years of ordinary Tuesdays, like 9 years of clocking in, doing the work. That must have felt like a small daily insult to a man of his gift. Like walking past that wall and choosing, okay, one more time to keep the faith, and I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I know a lot of people in my life. I don't think I could do that. That takes a very rare kind of courage that, like, even the movies would, I guess, maybe wanna show, but they don't show always this kind, not the loud kind, for example. This is a different kind of courage. This is the kind that has to renew itself, like, every single morning with no audience, no applause, no promise that the morning will ever come to you the day when it's gonna pay off. This man had no idea if this was a good idea or not. And I'm gonna call this next section "The Hand That Went Up." And then we know the pendulum starts to swing back exactly the way that one stubborn man in a swamp, I guess we would say, thought it was going to happen. By the early 1980s, mechanical watches were desirable again. And in 1982, the biggest name in the industry comes looking, right? You can imagine a knock on the door because Rolex wants an automatic movement for a watch that they're going to call the Daytona. And Zenith's old high beat chronograph is exactly what they've got in mind. And another company called Abel, it's Ebel, hey, we want the El Primero movements as well. We remember these things, we want them now. There's just one problem. Inside Zenith, it feels enormous. Oh my goodness. So we have to remake El Primero again. You would have to rebuild all of the tooling from nothing. The estimates at that time ran 6 or 7 million francs and also years of work because, as everyone knew for a fact, the capability to do this had been destroyed on orders completely. There was nothing left of the El Primero. And in that meeting, Charles Vermot sat and he listened. And then at the end, he raised his hand. And then he walked the directors up the stairs and they broke down a wall. And there it was, 9 crates, 150 dies, heavy dies, and that dust-covered binder, and it had every plan still filed in his own careful hand, exactly where he left it, in the exact order it needed to go back to work. 9 years of silence, and the payoff finally fit inside of a single afternoon with him raising his hand. Now, I want to talk about this next section because I want to talk about the afterlife and why this will never be a movie, okay? First, production restarted. The El Primero came back, first under a very new name, and it's still in production today, more than, I would say, a half century on, right? And here's the twist I think that makes collectors kind of smile. Rolex took the movement that an American company had ordered destroyed and made it the beating heart of the Daytona. They reworked it pretty heavily. They slowed down the beat rate from 5 seconds or five beats to four, and they stripped out the date and they changed a large share of the parts to kind of their own liking, and from 1988 all the way to the year 2000, the most sought after Rolex chronograph of its generation ran on a Zenith movement. To this day, collectors still call it the Zenith Daytona, and they will pay dearly for one. Abel, they leaned on the same movement for years as well. The engine Vermot saved did not merely survive, I would say it helped bankroll the entire recovery of the company that had tried to kill it. And here's how they thanked the man who made all of this possible. Like years later, a Swiss film crew asked Charles what he had gotten for saving the company and hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs that came with it. And this guy, right, of course, he's a watchmaker. He did not give a speech. He lifted his wrist up and he showed them a new El Primero the company had given him. The same watch he wore that was out in his garden. And he said, "It's a very nice watch. I like it very much." And that was all. Well, he and his wife, he added, they were taken out for a good meal as well, a watch and a dinner. For the movement that would go on to make fortunes for other people, and by every account, he was not the least bit bitter about it. Telling the whole story on camera, an old man now, this humble watchmaker was almost moved to tears, and it wasn't over the size of the reward. It was over the simple fact that the thing that he loved was allowed to continue to live. This, for me, this story has some connections to our story of Santos Dumont. The fact that they love these things so much that they just want to share them and they want them to be alive. And again, I continue to circle back to some of these stories. Like now, if I were to go and hand this story to like a movie studio tomorrow, and I said, "Here, you can have all of it. A hero nobody believed in, a ticking clock." And I mean, that is literally as it's possibly how it's meant to be, is a ticking clock. Because this man saved the very machine that measures time. There's a boardroom villain, right? There's a secret behind a wall. There's 9 years of silence, a watch and a dinner for a reward, and a vindication so complete that it ends up living inside a Rolex. And the screenwriters would look at me and they would turn and they would say, and they'd look at their notes and they'd come back and they'd go, "Bro, it's too neat. Lose the wall, maybe. It's too much on the nose. Like the watchmaker who saves time itself. That's cute, bro, but like nobody's gonna buy that. And nobody keeps a secret for that long, right? People can't keep to themselves what they had for breakfast. So maybe we give them a partner who talks them into it, and we make the whole thing more believable, or there's like a heist or something, right? And that's the joke. Like I cannot and you cannot make it believable because it actually already happened. So no, this probably will never be a movie, right? A big blockbuster movie, maybe a documentary. And not because it's not good enough. I would argue because it's too good. And worse than that for Hollywood, it's too true. And I can say that because I in Southern California, we're close enough to Hollywood. Look, you would not have to embellish a single frame of this story. And that's exactly why I don't think anybody will ever let you film it the proper way in a film to actually tell the story because, again, it's too true, it's too honest, and it's too good. And here's the last piece I want that might be my favorite. That attic is still there in the Locla. It's preserved, like the tools Vermont dragged up those stairs still sit on the shelves where he left them. And in 2023, the company that once called him sentimental put his name on a watch. You can actually find Charles Vermot, Charles Vermot, right, in print on the dial. There's ones if you flip over and you look at the case back, right, around it, you can actually see his name on those. And look, the man that they mocked got the last word, and his name is stamped now in steel. Charles Vermont did not save a watch. He agreed to be wrong for 9 years so that he could be right forever. And boy, was he right. I would say gloriously, provably, and maybe 6 or 7 million francs and a bunch of years saved. He was right. So that was the man who buried the future so it would still be alive for the rest of us looking back. And before I close this one out, this one has a name on it. This episode is for Nick Meijer. It's Nick. A while back, I had asked you about the watch that you first kind of got pulled into this whole world. And, we spoke about the watches that kind of got us into this space. And it turned into one of those conversations that always kind of seem to happen in watchmaking. Ours kind of wandered off, and we got into the pieces that we love for like no sensible reason at all. And when a Zenith came up, I saw your face light right up. And that stuck with me. So when this story found me, there was only one name that I wanted to pin to it. And so I just want to tell you, Nick, that you've been an absolute inspiration to me in this space, brother. Your work in podcasting, your work with the brands, and your plain foresight about where all of this was headed has been an absolute treat to watch up close. So thank you for the support. Thank you for the notes and the suggestions that have made this show better. So this one is yours. And if you are somehow new to his work, please fix that today. Stop listening to me and listen to Nick. Nick is the co-founder of 360 Watch out of Copenhagen, and he's the man who built Daily Watch into like the biggest watch account on all of Instagram. He also co-hosts, by the way, a very sharp and super funny weekly podcast alongside Christian Hagen. And if you don't know those folks, like they sit on the Academy for the GPHG, which again, our closest thing to the little corner of the world that is the Oscars. So go find them, support what they're doing as well, and tell them Wachowski or Restay sent you because they're just good dudes. So I'm Wachowski, wear something good. And just again, thank you for telling these stories. Thank you for sharing that. And to Nick, I hope you enjoyed this one. And to Christian, hey, nice to meet you, brother, digitally, I guess. I'll talk to y'all soon. Thank you again for listening, and have a great week.
From pocket to wrist, the tale still lives. Tiny clocks with big time myths. Gold in the rain, steel in the flame. Every scar remembers a name. Watch stories, watch stories. History on your skin. Watch stories, watch stories. Drama spun within. Little wheels, big stories. Ticking through the years. Watch stories, watch stories. Turn the page, come near. A king, a thief, a sailor's ring, a midnight deal, a wedding thing. Passed hand to hand across the land. Now every face leaves a mark in the band. Now watch stories, watch stories. History on your skin. Watch stories, watch stories. Drama spun within. Little wheels, big stories. Ticking through the years. Watch stories, watch stories. Turn the page, come near. Old hands, new hands, one small frame. Different lives, same heartbeat game. Tell me more, open that door. I want the next story untold. Watch stories, watch stories. History on your skin. Watch stories, watch stories. Drama spun within. Little wheels,